Welcome to the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I am David Brickley, and each and every episode we talk to the experts to keep you up to speed on the digital social marketing landscape. This one is episode 39. We're calling this one, we'll make it quick, the Larry Zonka podcast. There's not a lot of 39s in sports. We'll go Larry Zonka there for 39. On this program, we got Kelsey Cohen. She's a director of marketing at Bloomscape. I don't know if they'll go. I'll ask her if she's down for this type of tagline. It's kind of like the Postmates for plants, right? I don't know. But they strengthen your relationship with plants. They make plants buying easy, ready to go plants to your door. And this is a big industry. A lot of plant lovers out there. This is like a big need in the space, and they've had a pretty great growth trajectory. So I'm excited to talk about Bloomscape, excited to talk with Kelsey, really about building a brand from scratch. I don't think we've had too many people on the show thus far that really has started from ground zero and built that upper funnel marketing campaign, built social media from scratch. And I want to get the tips and tricks of what she did day one. She was a consultant, I believe, prior to Bloomscape. So what are her tips and tricks when you're launching a brand from scratch? Really excited to get into it. Episode 39, the director of marketing at Bloomscape, Kelsey Cohen. All right, everybody. She is the director of marketing at Bloomscape. Kelsey Cohen joins me on the Business of Social podcast. Kelsey, thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I always kick things off with a random question. I know you spent some time in LA, but now you're in Detroit. What's the best and worst thing about living in Detroit?
So I actually don't live in Detroit, but since I work here and I work for a startup, I probably spend the majority of my time here.
Okay.
I think the best thing about Detroit is it's got a really cool vibe.
Okay.
It's definitely has its own personality. It's a really interesting blend of kind of like historical, up and coming, and like transition. And it's got really surprisingly amazing food.
Nice.
I think the worst thing is the parking situations, because they're basically like vacant lots.
Interesting. All right. People don't realize how important parking is to just overall, mental health.
Exactly.
So I want to get into a little bit of background on Bloomscape. So as I kind of researched the company that you're obviously the director of marketing at, I kind of thought of it as like the Postmates of plants in a way. I don't know if you've used that or that kind of makes sense, but essentially your guys' whole goal is to develop be able to deliver healthy potted plants to people's doorstep and be able to facilitate that. So can you walk a little bit through what Bloomscape is and just a quick background on what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bloomscape is a plant delivery service. You are correct. I would actually describe it more like, if I had to make a comparison, I would describe it more like the Stitch Fix of plants than the Postmates of plants. So we launched last March. So we've been around like roughly 18 months or so. I was hired number 2 at the company, which is really exciting and kind of crazy. And
how many are you guys at now?
We are at, I want to say 14.
Okay.
I think, yeah. So we've been growing really fast, and our founder actually grew up in the greenhouse industry, comes from like 5 generations on both sides of like greenhouse growers, and just loved plants, had friends who loved plants, but buying plants was either not accessible or not easy. So we wanted to make that better. And why I would compare it more towards like Stitch Fix than Postmates is that we have one greenhouse right now where we grow all our houseplants. It's on the west side of Michigan. We make sure that we're growing like the healthiest plants that we can find. And one of the biggest differences is that when you buy plants from like a Home Depot or even a local garden center, they're grown in environments and cared by people who are experts in foliage plants. So our plants are literally coming directly from the greenhouse. Also, we've made a pretty big investment in curating a selection and creating a shopping experience on our website that helps people find the perfect plant for them and for their environment. So you can actually use a shop filter on our shop page. You can sort by size, you can sort by light, you can sort by pet friendliness, easiness to care for, all of that, in the hopes that you're finding the perfect plant for you.
So For the company, when you guys first started, was it 100% bootstrap? Was there investment on the front end? How did it kind of all come to be?
Yeah, so when we launched, I think we had some kind of like angel investment money, but not anywhere close to like a seed round. And we ended up closing our seed round close to, I think, around 2 million a few months after we launched. And we are actually in the process of our Series A right now.
And I'm guessing a huge part of that budget, especially in the early going, has to go towards marketing, right? Obviously, you have to build the foundation and have the ability to do this. But in a role, if you're number two, it seemed like now we have to introduce ourselves to the world and actually see if we have legs on this thing.
Yeah, so it was pretty much me doing marketing for the first 8 months or so. I didn't add a person to my team internally until November of 2018. I was lucky enough to, when I joined, we had a pretty fully fleshed out and very focused brand already from a visual standpoint, messaging standpoint. Justin and our branding agency had done a lot of research ahead of time on who our customers were, how should we be talking to them.
Any sales at all prior to you joining?
No, we didn't have a website prior to me joining.
Okay.
Like literally, I joined in January of 2018 and we launched the website in March. So
Gotcha.
I was able to build a marketing strategy from scratch.
So I'm curious about this because you go into a company like this and sure, you can spend $50,000 on a commercial on HGTV and try to hit your demographic. But from a startup company like that and being in this interesting sector or industry, what was your first step to map out a marketing strategy and what ended up being most successful as you got started?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that I was most excited about and probably was the kind of linchpin in me choosing to join Bloomscape is I have a pretty varied background. I've done everything from graphic design to running Facebook ads to art direction to comprehensive marketing strategies, data infrastructure, like you kind of name it, I've done it. And
a one-woman band.
Yeah, I described myself, I think, in my resume or cover letter when I applied for the job as a marketing Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
And where I was at my career is I felt like I was finally at a point where I had all these kind of disparate skills and experiences, and I was excited to kind of pull them together to build something new. And you don't get that opportunity very often to start literally from scratch. Like I had to remember how to set up a Google Analytics instance, like bare bones all the way from scratch. And so I was really excited about that, but I was also excited to kind of learn from a lot of the mistakes I had seen in other companies that I've either been working for internally or that I consulted with. So I made the choice to launch with a pretty holistic marketing strategy from the start, which is kind of unusual for startups. Usually you see startups kind of focusing on one channel only, because that's what they have.
Holistic meaning print, out of home, digital, social, everything.
Yeah, really focused on digital, not so much on print and out of home, but because I wanted to be able to track it and use our money wisely, but focused on content, focused on email marketing, organic social, paid search, organic search, and press, all from the very start.
What was the hardest thing? Again, starting from blank canvas is awesome. Okay. Yeah, no, but starting from a blank canvas is awesome, right? Because you can make certain mistakes and people aren't falling down different tracks. But what was the hardest thing about starting from scratch that you had to overcome early on?
I mean, honestly, that a lot of it was guesswork. So the first thing I did after I kind of jumped in and made the decision that I wanted to start with a pretty holistic approach to marketing from the very beginning. I wanted to create some sort of marketing persona to serve as a guiding light, especially when it came to content creation and targeting. But every other time that I had built out marketing personas, I had customer data to work with.
Yeah,
and we didn't really have customer data.
Yep.
So I had to be kind of clever with how I created those personas. So I used, we had a bunch of demographic reports and research that had been done, and we did Justin had done a beta test with probably around 200 people or so, And we decided to incentivize a like 20-minute survey that they would fill out in order to get like a free plant once Bloomscape actually launched. So and that data was skewed a bit, and I knew that kind of going into it because it was friends and family. It wasn't a perfect picture, but at least it gave us a place to start. So going in blind, I think was the hardest part of it.
From an upper funnel standpoint, are you putting out content, articles, blogs about plants and more generic content, and that's how you develop the demo that you're going to start targeting on the front end, or how'd you kind of go about that?
Yeah, so I actually borrowed a lot from an inbound marketing strategy that you would normally see with like a SaaS or a B2B company.
Okay.
So I along with like a holistic channel approach, I wanted to make sure that we were paying attention from top of funnel to bottom of funnel as well. So I created, I want to say like 9 or 10 kind of core pieces of content that we had before we launched that were all optimized for a bank of like pillar keywords, but were also targeted. I try to make sure that there was content that would be targeting the 3 main personas that we launched with kind of at each step of the purchasing funnel. Mm-hmm. So it would kind of cover all the bases from the very beginning, and then slowly built up the content curation kind of on top of that, but with that in mind as we move forward.
To date, what campaign has surprised you, or what ended up being the moment that kind of took off or really performed well for you guys?
I mean, there's been a lot of surprises. I think that the biggest campaign success we had early on, I created this really fun little quiz using Typeform, actually, and hooked it up to our marketing automation system that basically created a like find your perfect plant. So it asked a bunch of questions. All those questions sort of mirrored some of the assumptions that we were making about our personas.
Like, do you live in an apartment? Do you have natural light? Stuff like
exactly,
that.
Stuff like that. Do you have a family? Do you work a lot? Do you live in a city? That kind of thing. And then based off of those answers, gave them a suggestion of their perfect plant. And this went pretty viral for a couple months. We had it as our main link in our Instagram account. And I remember over one weekend, I just was looking at my email. I was like, man, I'm getting like a lot of form fills on this quiz. What's going on? And I realized that when people would start to follow us on Instagram, they would take the quiz right away. So it was this like really beautiful connection that was happening between like awareness, like pretty top of funnel of becoming an Instagram follower, to turning into a contact in our database, and then receiving like kind of customized marketing emails for that. So that was really fun. And
what were the results? I mean, did you have a certain amount of people that went through the quiz, and then what was your percentage on people actually saying, you know what, I'm actually going to go through to purchase on that?
Yeah, I think by the time we like stopped promoting it, it was like a 20-25% purchase rate.
That's awesome.
Off of like the completion of the quiz. And they were coming, even the people who maybe didn't make a purchase within that time frame, they were coming in not as just a blind contact. They were coming in with some background information.
I think that's so important, because I think a lot of times what marketers and businesses get wrong is they just, and I know you probably feel my pain and we can shed a tear together, just beating people over the head with buy plants now and $9.99, and if you live in an apartment, like buy this, buy this, buy this. And that's so interesting that, you had a little bit of awareness, you created this kind of fun, engaging quiz, and you saw 25% of people actually say, you know what, this is my plan, I'm going to actually go purchase it, which takes a little bit of thought, it takes a little bit of skill, but you probably see a lot of brands just making that mistake where they're not going through that upper funnel down to the lower funnel process. They're just kind of spamming people with buy now.
Yeah, and obviously, biggest chunk of my marketing experience has been on like the inbound marketing side, which is like the antithesis of that. It's all about content nurturing, providing content as value, creating that connection, continuing engagement. And that's something that when Justin and I, who's the CEO and founder, and I were very aligned with from the very beginning, that we didn't want to be a discount brand. We didn't want to be just like, buy this now, buy this now, buy this now. We wanted to really create this kind of lifestyle and this full experience. And as we're looking into 2019, that idea of like a full funnel experience and like a flywheel experience is becoming more and more important to our business and to our marketing strategy, which is really exciting.
I also looked it up. You guys have 35,000 followers on Instagram, which Instagram is a mature platform. It's tough to gain a lot of followers. And also in 18 months, that's actually pretty impressive. What has been your Instagram or social strategy? Because it's tough, right? When you're a product, how many brand loyalists, how many people actually want to follow and care about what you say on a daily or weekly basis? They may just want to come and buy from you a couple times a year. But to get 35,000 people that raise their hand and say, I want to have regular updates from Bloomscape is pretty impressive. How'd you go about building that?
Yeah, honestly, I think part of it was luck, because there's a burgeoning plant community on Instagram, and we were able to kind of time our launch correctly to really use that to catapult us. The other piece is we did a pretty large influencer push in our first 6 to 8 months.
Are there plant influencers out there I don't know about?
There are plant influencers out there.
All right.
So we kind of, using our marketing personas as a guide, we kind of built out our kind of a influencer kind of target list, and combined, it wasn't ever structured just as like a post and that was it. It was always like a post and a video and a giveaway, a post and a video or an Instagram story plus like a blog post.
And these are micro influencers at their core. What are we talking here? Anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 followers, or?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, roughly. I think most of them kind of were between like 30 to 150K or so. And honestly, the push really came after our launch. We did like a big launch with like PR and a group of influencers doing unboxing videos. And after that, it honestly became just, I needed more content. And as one person, I couldn't keep up with it.
Smart.
So I put together a plant life series and a package for influencers that basically was a question and answer. They gave us some photos to turn into a blog post. And then they posted about us on their feed and stories and did a giveaway. And that was super successful from both like creating like this Instagram following, but also from helping to create this a couple of really amazing pieces of user-generated content that we used in email.
Was the giveaway tied to following Bloomscape on Instagram? Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys saw a pretty amazing growth on that strategy alone.
Yep. And I think influencers are interesting. I think there's a lot of power. Obviously, there's a lot of power of like recommendation. But what we found is that we had the most successful kind of relationships with influencers who followers shared the motivation and the aspirations of like wanting to be a plant person versus just an influencer who was a plant person. So I think, one of the hard lessons I think I learned was that you really have to sort of put yourself in the mind of someone who's following this influencer before you would agree to like enter into a partnership. Because the influencers that were more kind of like fashion focused or home decor focused didn't have the same kind of stickiness as the ones that were kind of sharing their love of plants in a more genuine way.
I want to get into, and all that stuff is super valuable, especially building from scratch, and some of those nuggets you dropped I think is super helpful for the audience. For 6 years, you were a marketing consultant, helped B2B and B2C, Toyota Canada, BuzzTime Media, NBC Universal. So I want to get into marketing as a whole. I'll start with kind of a broad question. How do you approach marketing, and what's your core belief on how to go about it?
How would I phrase that? I think my core belief in marketing is you have to let the data that your customers are providing you kind of tell the story and lead the way. I am a really big believer that every moment of interaction is an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody. And a conversation, as you know, is not just a one-sided, hey, I'm telling you this thing, but it's also an opportunity for you to listen and for someone to reply back. And I think the listening piece is where a lot of people like forget about. And what I mean by that is that like if you're strategic about how you're structuring your content, you're strategic about how you're structuring your newsletters and your Instagram posts and your even down to your like Facebook ads, you can get a lot of information about who someone is, what their motivations are, what's top of mind, just by the mere fact that they interacted with that piece of content.
Right.
And that creates a really amazing and powerful story about that person, especially when you can combine that then with more kind of like psychographic and like storytelling aspects that can tap into that. And I think that that idea and that philosophy has really been the driving force of how I approach any sort of marketing recommendations, marketing advice, and building out marketing strategies.
Yeah, and I think, you have to build a community, right? And like you mentioned earlier, which I totally agree with, provide value. And I think that is a long-term game, as we all know, and it takes some time to build a community and provide value over time. But it's just so the proof is in the pudding that that's going to work long term if you actually put in the work and effort. But I think in the age of quick fixes and wanting their stuff now, it's a lot of businesses. I think the majority of businesses get that part wrong because it's about cold hard sales and quarterly earning reports. And it takes time. I think you would agree to build a community and provide value and provide content that a community wants to kind of build around.
And exactly. And you also have to you have to understand both sides of marketing, I think, especially now. You have to be data-driven, you have to be analytical, you have to be logical, not just in the discovery of the data itself, but also in how you're choosing to leverage and use that data.
Right.
And you have to be a storyteller. And that's a lot for one marketer.
It is. I always like asking this question, and you broke down marketing brilliantly, but can you explain to the audience in your own words the difference between sales and marketing and how you've tried to, the people you've consulted with, tried to explain that line in the sand?
Yeah. I think it's a little bit, I think it definitely depends on the business, but in my experience, the most productive sales teams are very tightly aligned with their marketing teams. There's a lot of untapped information and data that sits in a marketing team that is very often not visible and not shared with the sales team, which is so counterproductive.
And ultimately, both teams have the same exact
goal.
ROI. Yeah,
right.
Same goal.
We have the same goal. And, what my previous company that I worked for before Bloomscape was FarmLogs, which is an ad tech software startup based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we had an inbound marketing team that worked with the sales team. And it was amazing to see once there was really concrete alignment between the two teams, like down to, looking into rep performance data and trying to only push leads to specific reps that were that they've had luck with closing in the past. So kind of taking like the matchmaking side of it, but also providing the same kind of content and visibility into what the users and customers were receiving, sharing that with the sales team, making sure that the lead scoring methodology that the marketing team was using was adopted and understood by the sales team. So when they were looking at their contact objects, they knew exactly what they were looking at and they understood what that meant. And
or if sales does a follow-up at 90 days or after the contract ends, giving that information back to marketing and saying, we thought we were going to get one product and we felt like we kind of didn't get it. And that's great for you to know as a storyteller to make sure you're telling that message.
Exactly. And that feedback loop, you're exactly right, is the other key piece of that.
So when you, as a consultant, you sit down and they say, Kelsey, listen, we haven't done any marketing. We don't know what we're doing. We have a decent business. We have a lot of, a handful of employees and things are good, but I know we need to start looking at marketing. What's the first questions or the first statements you start to make with somebody in a room with that type of question or that type of situation?
I like to see, I think the first thing I ask is about their customers, who their customers are, why their best customers keep being their customers, what value are they providing. I like to get kind of that that story from the business itself, kind of that internal perspective of what their customers are, and then being able to use that and look at any data that they have around that to see if what they think about their customers is actually true. And a lot of times those things are not the same.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of assumptions that get made, especially with companies that maybe haven't had a marketing team before or have only focused on kind of one part of marketing. A lot of the consultancy work that I've done has been, we've been doing this one thing and now this one thing isn't working well enough for us. How do we start to branch out? Where do we go next? What do we do better? And I think starting with that customer, using some data to kind of either poke holes into some of those assumptions or confirm them, and then really looking at what's working, where are those opportunities? Because I think the other piece of that is companies have a hard time sort of pinpointing and prioritizing like the low-hanging fruit or the things that are going to be most impactful. So looking at those things that people are already trying to do, the places where they're already finding value, and figuring out a way to make that less like frictionless, more enticing, and optimize those areas rather than just trying to bang your head against the wall doing what you think is going to be the most valuable.
I think one thing I've seen as a marketer too is just the lack of analyzing the data, like you mentioned. And this is at the Fortune 500 brand level. I think a lot of Fortune 500 brands are still spending a lot of money in print and a lot of money even in television advertising, where it probably could be better served if they move more money into digital or social. But they just keep on doing the same thing because it's what they've always done. Yeah. Is that a common problem you've seen with a lot of your different companies you've worked with, where they run these campaigns, but they never actually look at it and say which part worked best,
Yeah, absolutely. So I've seen that from both extremes. I think I've seen it from more established companies who are just doing the same thing that they've always done. Right. It's like, we're going to send out this email blast every week, and we're going to do these print ads, and we're going to go to these trade shows, and I'm going to put out a commercial or something. And then I've seen the other extreme where it's maybe smaller companies or startup companies who've only been running Facebook ads. And I think the kind of hard truth about where we are today as marketers is that, again, it comes back to you have to be both. You have to be telling a story in kind of all different places. Yeah. You also have to be super strategic about where you're doing that. And you have to be authentic about it. That's the other thing. I think that there's as there's a kind of a new wave and new generation of marketing thinkers moving into executive positions, I think we're going to see a lot more creativity and a lot more representation across the channels coming out of lots of different companies. But I think that that's going to be a slow change for some more established industries. I think the automotive industry is definitely one. Trade show industries would be another.
In your opinion, what brand out there in space does marketing really, really well, or someone that you look up to or idolize?
Yeah, so I think I really, really love Away, the travel bags.
I'm a purchaser. I'm an owner.
I'm not an owner, but I really admire their marketing.
If you travel even a little bit, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I've heard great things about them. But I really admire their marketing strategies, and they're quite creative. I actually just listened to an interview with the founder and was just blown away by the story about her coffee table book at launch. That they put like a gift card inside because it's so creative, and it was like a really amazing kind of like shot in the dark, and they just like went for it, executed it. And then they've made some really interesting, I think their website is beautiful. It's informative, it's straightforward, but it's also aspirational. And I think that combination is hard to achieve. As someone who's trying to achieve that, it's hard to achieve, of being very like forward and upfront about what the value of the product is, but also
especially in an industry where how many freaking suitcase companies are, it's hard to infiltrate and be a game changer when there's companies that have been around for 50 years making suitcases.
Yeah, so Away really impresses me.
The only issue I have with Away is one of their product lines is called the Carry-On, and they have different sizes, and some of the sizes you can't carry on. It gets confusing. That's the only thing I'll say. But I'm a big away fan.
That's a problem for product.
Yeah, exactly. That's not marketing. How have you found any creative ways to stay in front of your core demographic and your audience or your purchasers without it feeling like spam? You've talked a little bit about the quizzes and things like that, but how do you stay fresh and stay in front of your demographic in like a more soft approach way?
Yeah, I think we try to be really topical. So we try to be topical in the things that we're talking about and also the plants that we're choosing to feature and offer. And we also try to keep it, always connect it back to someone's success with a plant. So it's not just about a plant that's on your desk and then it's going to die and you'll get another one. It's about kind of cultivating that relationship.
What success with the plant? What does that even mean? Is that just how long it stays alive, or how do you?
So one of the interesting things that we've kind of learned is that plants are not like a home decor object. Plants become a passion for people. And with that,
well, they actually get super sad if it starts to die and they want to nurse it back to health. It's almost like an animal.
You would not believe.
Interesting. And so you can pull on those heartstrings a little bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, and also just provide them with information to help them be better at that. You know, we have we actually have like a service where you can talk to Plant Mom, who's actually Justin's real mom. She's our like plant program director, Joyce. But you can fill out a form and you can actually communicate with Plant Mom if you're having a problem with your plant. And we give out like seasonal plant care tips. And we try to, one of the projects that we're working on right now is figuring out ways that we can kind of add that plant care kind of content story into the purchasing funnel on the website too. So when people are going to click on the product page of a plant, they might have questions about, well, how do I know I'm going to be successful with this? How have other people been successful with this plant? Is this really the right plant for me? So kind of being able to weave in that story and tapping into that kind of shared mutual interest with our customers, I think, is how we keep it fresh.
See, I think that's really important. Again, a lot of brands get this wrong. Is you're creating a community, you're creating an area where even after someone purchases or hasn't purchased yet, they can actually get value and get answers. Which then you just start to build. Then people start walking in your front door, and oh, by the way, much like Amazon. Amazon bought rights to Thursday Night Football, and you can watch a football game. Oh, by the way, what you left in your cart a couple of weeks ago is right below the football game if you want to. And I think it's just a smart way to get people in the door. It seems like you guys got that.
Yeah, because we really don't want people to just buy a plant from us and that's the last plant they ever own and that's the last thing that they ever interact with Bloomscape. We really see it as an opportunity to, if they want one plant, great, we're going to help you be the best plant parent you can be. If you want 50 plants, then awesome, we're going to help you do that too. And it's been really interesting. We see a lot of customers who sort of run the gambit on that. We see people who are like, share stuff on Instagram, like, I just got my first plant baby, hope I don't kill it, to people who are like decking out their office and they're buying their 50th plant from us or something. So it's pretty amazing.
It's funny you say that. One of my buddies bought me a money tree and it started dying. And to your point, I'm like, we got to nurse this thing back to health. You can't have a money tree die. That's like bad luck. So the whole office has been helping make sure it gets water and things like that.
Yeah, you need to reach out to Plant Mom.
Yeah, I might have to ask you to send the plant or two this way. Do you have any fun stories, and it doesn't have to be at Bloomscape, with any of your other clients too, of A/B testing that surprised you or changed your perception on a campaign or a way to market?
Yeah, actually. So, and I think this goes right back to what I was kind of saying about customer assumptions versus customer reality. So when I worked at Farm Logs, our customers and our users are farmers. They were row crop farmers. And I have been spending, so when I joined the company, there was like 25-ish people or so. And for a while, it was just kind of me doing a lot of the setup, a lot of content curation, all of that. And I was spending all this time making these beautiful emails for these nurture streams. They were lovely, and I was like coding them, and I was picking out the images and spent all this time designing them. And then one day I just like didn't have time to do it. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to send out a text-based email, and because I don't have time to code this email right now, and see what happens. And that email performed better than anything we had ever done.
Interesting.
And it's one of those things that's a little bit counterintuitive.
And that's just like linked out to other articles and like rather than having images.
Instead of like an HTML email, there were no images. It was just text. It came from the same from name. It had the same type of subject line. It was just a text email without those images. And for whatever reason, that generated more leads and that produced more sales than anything before. And,
hey, well, let's make sure we try that out. I'm telling my marketer here to A/B test that.
I don't think that, like, I would expect the opposite to be true for our Bloomscape customers. But it just goes to show you that you kind of have to know who the customer is and make your decisions, even down to something so silly as that, based off of like that demographic and that information versus just something that you want them to be interested in.
And it's different, right? I'm sure so many people are so used to seeing beautiful HTML with photos and the right font that maybe the text, I'm sure the text email felt more personal, almost if you made that email specifically for them. And that way it felt like it held more weight in their inbox type deal.
Exactly.
You don't have to share budget numbers, but in terms of percentage, where are your marketing dollars currently going? Is it 50% social, 30%, whatever, the different Pandora or different things? Like, how have you kind of split it out and what's working the best right now?
Yeah, so we've been pretty focused on the majority of our acquisition budget goes to paid social, Facebook and Instagram, and then paid search. We also have dedicated budget.
So Google, Facebook, Instagram, nothing on Twitter?
Not yet.
Gotcha.
We're going to be branching out into kind of other channels going into 2019. I'm really excited to kind of explore Pinterest again.
Yeah.
We had played around with it a little bit last year, but it was definitely a work in progress then. I've heard that they've made a lot of improvements to it. And then editorials like PR and stuff like that too.
So majority of your budget is going towards the Googles, Facebooks of the world.
Yep. And then I would say from a resource standpoint, focusing on content is probably the biggest piece of that. So we spend the most money on the acquisition channels, but I think the time and effort really is dedicated towards the content that we're creating.
Awesome. I got some rapid fire questions here for you towards the end of our conversation. What is the one marketing tool that you cannot live without?
HubSpot.
We use HubSpot as well. Big fan. From a business perspective, what social platform seems to be working the best for you right now?
Instagram.
Rank in order of importance from your marketing standpoint. Google, Facebook, Instagram, email.
Is Google both paid and organic?
Yes.
Google.
Okay. In an industry, FOMO is a major thing. What's one way that you keep up to speed on all the different changing things happening in our landscape?
I read a lot. I read everything that I possibly can. I listen to, I have a 1-hour commute, so I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Okay.
And not just from a marketing perspective, but just kind of an overall business perspective too.
From a marketing standpoint, any must follows, whether it's on Twitter, Instagram, et cetera, that provides really good advice or any good tidbits to kind of keep your...
I've been really interested in kind of hearing, I love interviews. I think you can learn a lot about what other people have. Obviously, you love interviews too, but you can learn a lot about other people's experiences.
I happen to just, I don't know about you because you commute and do podcasts. I retain a lot more from a conversation than reading a book type deal.
So I've been really into Masters of Scale podcast, which is one of my favorites, and Adlandia. Is it Adlandia? I think is the other one that I listen to. That's kind of more topical marketing. And then, I think Seth Godin, is he the author?
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Love him.
Amazing.
That dude is phenomenal. I got one for you. Marketing book podcasts I would recommend. I listen to that every week or so.
Okay.
He interviews a lot of authors, a lot of people that have done some amazing things. And I learned one thing or two. So shout out to the marketing book. Any advice for you? Anybody starting a brand from scratch or getting their they finally have been given the reins to run marketing for a brand or for a department, what's your biggest advice you would give that person?
I would say don't be afraid to push back on something when you know it's not right. And I think marketing always is in an interesting spot because they sit within kind of an unique intersection of product data, customer data, sales data, all of that. And they're the people who kind of have to use that and leverage that, which gives you more insight than either one of those kind of departments has alone. So if you think that something isn't right and you're seeing it in data and your gut's telling you that, push back on that and make a case for it.
Love it. And then finally, if you could recommend anybody in your network that you think would provide value for my listeners and would be a good guest on the podcast, anybody that comes to mind off the top of your head?
Yeah, one of my mentors, Kelsey Brickley, she's based out of Vancouver, Canada. She kind of taught me everything I know.
Awesome. I'll have to hit you up for that intro. Well, thank you so much for your time and all the knowledge you dropped, Kelsey. That was amazing, and wish you the best of luck. And might have to buy a plant or two from you guys here coming up. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Talk soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.
All right. Thank you so much to Kelsey Cohen for joining us on the program. That was really insightful. Again, really awesome to hear from her and what she's been able to accomplish coming in day one, really being the first hire and building this brand from scratch. I really like what she said, and this goes from social to marketing. Starting off with building that community first and foremost, and then being able to sprinkle in those call to actions, and you're not just selling people constantly over and over and over again, but building a community first, the plant enthusiast, who's your fan base, who's your core demo, and then go after that. I also thought I kind of geeked out over was the long form email, kind of HTML versus text. You know, she found herself with not a lot of time on her hands, so she sent out that text-only email newsletter and ended up getting the best results ever. So it is funny, not only when sometimes you think you're short for time and you try something, it's kind of an A/B test, and she found something there that worked with her audience. So just, I think, a reminder of all of us marketers, how you continue to A/B test your demographic and your community with those different things. And I think overall the best advice from her was, as a new marketer, don't be afraid to push back on something. If something doesn't feel right in your gut, or if you've, from previous experience, it hasn't really been, something that's worked very well, then to push back and be able to, based on off some data and why you think those things are. But a lot of people in marketing keep on doing things because that's the way it's always been done. And I think for all of us, you need more marketers that are able to push back and question why. Why are we doing this? And does it actually work? So great episode from Kelsey Cohen from Bloomscape. Thank her so much. She's also going to send us some plants that we can have here at the office, so appreciate that as well. This has been yet another edition, episode 39 of the Business of Social podcast, powered by STN Digital. I want to thank Dylan, Will, and Furker for all their help on the program. My name is David Brickley. Once again, Business of Social podcast, powered by STN Digital.